Cali bonita, eres un Edén de valles hermosos y lindas mujeres que siempre soñé.
Welcome back. I've been in the U.S. for a couple of days now, and I'm going right back out of here to Cali, Colombia. Now, I just came back from South Africa. I've been there for a while, and South Africa is the country for me in the continent of Africa when it comes to choosing which country I like the best. Is South Africa. But if you're black and you haven't visited Africa as of yet to any country, and you go back and forth to Colombia and Brazil, probably chasing hoes, take your ass to Africa and visit at least one country and stop being stuck in one country. But to the topic, Cali, is Colombia really better than Brazil for travelers? This video, I'm going to dive into both countries, Colombia and Brazil. And to be honest, it's very hard to choose Colombia over Brazil easily for me, since Brazil was the first South American country I visited. And since then, I visited many times more fingers than I have on my hands. So it's been a lot of times I visited Brazil to just many various cities. Matter of fact, I visited more cities in Brazil than in my own country in the US. So that lets you know I do love Brazil. But on this trip, I'm trying to make myself like Colombia more. And right now I'm in Miami. And since it is a morning flight and my flight arrived at night, I had to get a hotel. So I'm about to go to my hotel, relax, get some sleep, and the next morning take my ass right back to this airport to go to Cali, Colombia. And to my South Africans, if you're still watching me, because I know how it is sometimes, you only like to watch content that is in your country, and when the person that's making the video goes to a different country, you kind of tune out. But if you're still watching, we were talking about Miami compared to Durban. Well, I'm right here in Miami, and I'm actually staying very close to the airport. Instead of staying here, I was thinking about staying near Ocean's Drive. Then I thought about all the tourism and all the traffic, and plus it's late night, so let me just stay near the airport so that I can catch a shuttle less than 15 minutes away from this place and go straight to the airport to make my flight on time. That's the key, on time. So since I'm here, let me show you a little bit of this room. It's not so big, but it's just perfect because, again, it's just overnight. So I'm only here for a couple of hours, and early in the morning, I'm going downstairs for the free breakfast, take a shuttle, and prepare for my flight. So let's get into it. Is Colombia really better than Brazil for travelers? So I'm trying to make myself like Colombia more than Brazil. I already mentioned that in the beginning of the video. The reason is I think I've traveled to Brazil too much, so many times, that I need to divert that same amount of time into another country in the continent of South America. Now, I have been to Guyana. I do like Guyana, but I kind of like Colombia way more than Guyana, so I chose to go to Colombia. And also, this is an open discussion to people that have traveled to both countries of which country do you like more and why. And also, if you're a new traveler and you're trying to make a decision of where to go, you might want to listen to this video. So just by location of getting to South America, to Colombia or Brazil, my location is unique because the Washington DC, the DMV area, is considered mid-Atlantic. So that means we're in the middle of the northeast and the southeast. So to get anywhere in South America, I can get there very quickly compared to somebody that lives in mid-America or the West Coast. And with that, the cost is down compared to those two places also, meaning the Midwest and the West Coast. So when trying to make myself like Colombia more than Brazil when it comes to the location for me, it's not the problem. If I want to go to the US straight to Manaus, which is a city in Brazil, to get there, I can get there a straight shot from Miami, and it'll take me about 5 hours and some change. So the entry into Brazil, the quickest, will be Manaus. Most people go to Rio de Janeiro because Rio de Janeiro is the city in Brazil that gets most of the promotion and tourism. No other city can compete. And when it comes to Colombia, the quickest city for me to get into will be Bogota. That's the capital. And for me to get to Bogota from Miami is about 3 hours and some change. So it's a little bit quicker, but not that much. than Manaus. So what I'm saying is that location is not the problem, especially if you live near where I live at. If you live in the Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, or the Southeast, to get to any of those two countries, Brazil or Colombia, the location is not going to be your problem when it comes to making a decision of which you like more. That shouldn't be the issue. Now, the entry into these countries is a little bit different. Now in Brazil, because of the new administration, they have Lula. That's the current president. So he's back in office because he was once the president in Brazil. I don't know, Brazil, have you noticed most of the presidents, they've been in jail before? Ever since I've been going to Brazil since 2008, almost at least every other president, they went to jail or they going to jail. Anyways, Lula has diverted back to how it was originally, which is making Americans, meaning Canada and the US, you want to come to Brazil, you have to go back to the old way of having or getting a visa. And that's simply because Lula, he doesn't really like Trump. You know, the prior president, Bolsonaro, he supported Trump, and what he did that Trump had did landed Bolsonaro in jail for 27 years. That's fucked up. But hey, anyway, so yeah, that's what Lula did. You know, you're gonna make Brazilians visit your country, and we need a visa as Brazilians. Then we're gonna make you Americans have or need to get a visa as well, except for Mexicans. You know, Mexico is part of North America. It's 3 countries that make up North America: Mexico, the U.S., and Canada. If you're Mexican, you do not need a visa. All you need to have is your passport. So with the entry requirements, you know, that really doesn't bother me because, again, like I said, when I first came to Brazil, I needed to get it anyway. So I know the procedure, and plus now the procedure is very easy because you can do it online versus before when I actually had to drive to the embassy in DC to get my visa situated. But to go back to the presidency, Bolsonaro, 27 years, and he's like, what, 60, 70 years old? That's like a lifetime sentence. His lawyer must be the shittiest lawyer in Brazil. Shit. And also, just look at this. Look at all the fucking ingredients in 2 crackers. Soybean oil, corn syrup, barley malt extract. All these fucking, just in 2 crackers? All this shit? I don't know, man. It's kind of scary, man. And if you think about it, all this that I'm getting served is just nothing but just sugar. So I am glad I do take my ass to the gym and I'm not a slob. But Colombia, the entry requirements is just that all you need as an American, meaning Canada, the US, and also Mexico, you do not need a visa to come to Colombia. So it's a little bit easier, but again, the entry requirements for both countries, Brazil and Colombia, is not a big deal with me. I'm trying to make myself like Colombia more. Could it be just the language? Now, when it comes to language for both countries, one speaks Spanish while the other speaks Portuguese. And the answer is no, they're not the same. You're not going to go to Brazil just speaking Spanish thinking that everybody's going to know what you're saying. They're nice people, so they may smile and you might think they understand everything, but they're just being polite. You know, welcome to South America. You know, people just going to smile, but they don't know what the fuck you're talking about. So they're not interchangeable. There's certain words that mean the same thing, while the rest of the sentence is going to be totally lost in translation between the two. So you're going to have to learn the language only if you choose to move around or maneuver around the country, especially if you want to go to different cities, the best, because you'll know at least a little bit of the language so you can grasp what the person is saying if you're asking for directions or if you need some help or if you just need anything in general. If you got like a little grasp of any of the languages between Spanish and Portuguese, you're gonna maneuver around better as if you didn't know anything. But you can't go to Colombia speaking Portuguese thinking that majority of people would know what the fuck you're saying, because they're not the same. It's not like British English and American English. It's the same shit, different dialects, you sound different. Spanish and Portuguese is not the same at all. So keep that in mind. And with that, the language between the two doesn't really bother me. Coming from the US, I would say our second language is Spanish. So I have a lot of Spanish speaking friends, and I just know Spanish because in my high school, I had to know another language in order to get my diploma. So in order to graduate, you got to take a second language, and my second language was Spanish. So I got a little grasp of Spanish, but the crazy thing is I know Portuguese well more, and I'm more fluent in Portuguese than I am in Spanish. So the 3 years taking Spanish in high school is nothing compared to, it's been over a decade of me visiting Brazil with no book knowledge, but just going to the country many times, speaking the language. So that just shows that, you know, you can get a book and try to learn the language, but it's nothing compared to actually going to that country, learning the language. You grasp it more, you remember it more, and it's just better for me. I don't know how you learn a different language, but a book is helpful only after you know a little bit more of the language versus just going deep diving into a book. But I know for some travelers who travel back and forth to one of these countries, Brazil, Colombia, or even both, some of them probably never grasp anything when it comes to the language, because the only thing they're trying to learn is how much is the coochie. And speaking of coochie, let's talk about women. Some of us are single. Some men travel just for that, while others travel just for the travel experience, and anything that comes out of that, oh well, that's just a plus. I'm one of those. I'm not the here's my money, where's the coochie type, but I know there's a lot of people that do that, a lot of men that do that, which is it's ridiculous to me. It's funny, but hey, to each his own. But yes, there is a difference between the two when it comes to women in Brazil, women in Colombia. And it goes back to something I was mentioning if you was watching my South African vlogs, and it all boils down to the one word called culture. The culture in Brazil is not the same culture in Colombia. Your first time visiting, it might look the same or seem similar, but it's absolutely different. You know, it's not the same. All countries are not the same. All people are not the same. And even if you meet an individual in that particular country, that one individual does not represent the whole country. Therefore, she's not going to be the same between the rest of the women or people you might meet in that particular country. So you got to get that right. You know, a lot of people go to a country, have a bad experience, and blame the whole country. I talked about this before. If you have a bad experience, that's your personal bad experience. I might go to that same country and have a great experience, or a greater experience than you. Everything is all on an individual basis. So between the two countries, when it comes to women, and one country having higher standards in beauty than the other, then only a person that have visited both countries would know what I'm about to say, and that would go to Colombia. With Colombia, beauty is integrated into their culture. It's part of their culture. And you probably didn't notice this a couple of minutes ago in the video, or you probably don't notice this if you have traveled to Colombia, but you'll see not just the word beauty, but you'll see also beauty implemented into the culture, aesthetics when we're talking about women, and social norms when we're talking about women. Here in Colombia, beauty is more formal, and it's in daily life within their people and their culture. You can go to any mall in Colombia, you'll see women wearing their best outfits, high heels, makeup, and this is just going to just a store or just to the mall. You go to any malls in Colombia, and you go to the malls in Brazil, and we're just talking about women for right now, and you compare the two, Colombia will blow them out the park. Because again, beauty, as you have seen, is part of Colombian culture, whereas in Brazil it feels more focused on the body, and it's rooted in the culture of beach life, fitness life, carnival, whereas in Colombia it's on a daily basis. So that's the difference. Therefore, for a woman, the pressure to adhere to beauty standards is intense in both countries, but the difference is, what I'm trying to emphasize is that in Colombia it's more, how could I say, complete, because it's on a daily basis, and it's not just focused on just the body, it's everything. It's what you wear, hair, makeup, and like I keep mentioning, it's on a daily basis. It's not focused on a body part or just an annual event like carnival or anything like that. These women here in Colombia, this is on a daily basis. So when it comes to me trying to like Colombia more, Hey, that could be one aspect, but again, I'm not a traveler who just travels just for the coochie. Like I said, I like to travel for the travel experience, and anything that comes out of that, positive or negative, oh well. And clarification to my friends in Africa, specifically in South Africa, because that's where most of my friends are in the continent. Oh yeah, also in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa. For my friends in the U.S., when they say that a lot of women in Brazil and Colombia, these are two of the places that I've traveled to, have a lot of BBLs. And a clarification is that is not true. You have to take Brazil out. The procedure BBL, which means Brazilian butt lift, it is coined that because the first person to do this procedure was Brazilian. And to honor the Brazilian surgeon who pioneered this technique, they gave the acronym BBL, Brazilian butt lift. However, Colombia has embraced this procedure, and more deeply, again, it is part of Colombian culture. BBL is not part of Brazilian culture. You go to Brazil, what you will see is women with natural aesthetics, natural curves. And let's just say if you go to Brazil and you do see it, most likely it's going to be done on a white woman that has a good job or has a wealthy husband or boyfriend or man who has the money to do so. Whereas here in Colombia, it's not about how can you afford it or a black or white thing. It's about a cultural thing. So all women here in Colombia, most likely, whether it's the top or bottom, have done something. Not all, but close to it. Opposed to Brazil, you're not going to see that at all. It's too costly, and Brazil have high unemployment and not that many jobs. So not a lot of people can afford it, whereas here in Colombia, they make it affordable to their people because it is part of their culture. So that's a big difference. So it might be called a BBL. You go to Brazil, you're not going to see none of that. Just as I made a video about Brazil saying that if you go to Brazil, it's not a lot of black people. A lot of people saw that video and they made, some comments, but I'll make a whole video about that when I do go to Brazil. But when you go to Brazil, you go outside of where the blacks are concentrated at, you will see sprinkles, but you go all the way up north or all the way down south, you're not going to see any black people. It's not going to be a lot of black people. And you also got to remember that we're not talking about slavery. We're talking about now. So we're talking about migration, immigrants going to other countries, and also we're talking about culturally what people want to be called. And if you visited Brazil like I have, more than one city, so that means you visited various places within the country, you'll notice that they don't have the one drop rule. So Brazil is not the US. So you'll meet a lot of people that you might think is black, but if you ask them, they're not claiming black. They're claiming something else, or they say that I'm tricolor. So that takes away from being black. You have to respect what people want to be called. So that's why I made that video back then saying that it's not a lot of black people in Brazil as they once did have when it was slavery going on, but we're talking about modern day now, which is a big difference. Like I just mentioned, it is high unemployment in Brazil. So no Caribbeans, no Africans as of now want to migrate to Brazil, but there are other places that they want to migrate to, which is Europe, Canada, and the US. They're not coming to Brazil. So what Brazil once had is diminishing. Plus, if you want to go back in history, you can't forget that Brazil did do the same thing that the US did, which is whitening of Brazil, bringing Italians, Lebanese, and other European immigrants to Brazil to whiten it out. So you add that on top of today, current day, that they do not have a higher black population than the US, specifically because of migration that's currently happening, has been happening for decades. So what do all that mean? So all that means that Brazil does have the highest mixed population. That's something that Brazil or a Brazilian would agree with me. They would not agree with me saying that they have more blacks than whites in Brazil. That's crazy, because once you go there, like I mentioned, you will see that is not true. Yeah, but it goes deep. You got to be a critical thinker. You can't be a dumbass. You just gotta just open up your eyes, and if you travel, you'll see or know exactly what I'm talking about. And history repeats itself. So by Brazil being, I would say, the mixed country, I wouldn't doubt that sooner or later the U.S. would probably sooner or later become the same exact thing. And maybe that's probably why, the U.S. is so hung up on the immigration thing and stopping that. And if you have followed my South African video, especially if you watched the last one, you will see that it's lots of countries going in the same direction as being nationalism, meaning that they don't want a lot of immigrants coming to their country, increasing their population. That's a key factor. Migration, something that I said Brazil does not have more than the US. Nobody wants to migrate to a high unemployment country. Do the math. Over the decades, the years, employment is or has been much better in the US than in Brazil. So if you're African, if you're black, whatever you want to call yourself, you're not going to migrate to Brazil. You come into the US. That's where the money is. So since we touched a little bit about race, let's get into racial issues, especially if you're a black traveler traveling to Brazil or Colombia. So if you're white, it doesn't apply to you. You're good. If you're Asian, it may apply to you. But specifically, if you're a black traveler, you're traveling to any of the two countries, I would say that in Brazil, it's more racial issues than here in Colombia. Brazil has way more racial issues overall when we're talking about the continent of South America, because Brazil, here in South America, they do have the most black people in their continent. Not above in North America, but in their continent. So therefore, of course, Brazil is going to have more racial issues. Also, with Brazil being the last country to end slavery, they have very deep issues when it comes to race. And we could just start just by, a country's administration. If Brazil has all these black people, where's all the black presidents, or where are all the black people in government in Brazil? Like I mentioned, you don't really see none of that. But when it comes to race, again, you will have more racial issues in Brazil versus Colombia, especially if you maneuver around. And when I say maneuver around, I mean go beyond like the tourist areas in a specific city. I've been maneuvering around here in Colombia since I think 2011, with the first city visited was here in Cali, Colombia, and visiting different cities within the country of Colombia. And so far, I never ran into any type of racial issues. Not saying that it's not here, because I'm pretty sure it's here. Anywhere you go in the world, I don't know why it's like this, but if it's black people and white people, it's always going to be some type of racial tension, and usually it's men. But any country you go to and it's a mixed population, it's going to be some type of racial issues, whether it's Singapore, Malaysia, South Africa, the US, Canada, anywhere in the UK where it's black and white people and other people also. It's always fucking racial issues, man. And it's always the men. They're the ones who spearhead this. But I never had any issues, knock on wood, thank God, here in Colombia. But I have had issues in Brazil. And I've mentioned one many times before, and that was to the city of Campina Grande in Brazil. That's the big one. So go back to my old Brazil videos and check some of those videos out where I speak more in depth about that. But the little issues I have in Brazil, especially in Rio de Janeiro, I don't know how many of y'all have visited that city, but it's a city and state. It's like New York, New York. New York City is in the state of New York. Rio de Janeiro is in the state of Rio de Janeiro. So it's a very big city, but don't forget it's also a state. Now, once you go outside the tourist zone in Rio de Janeiro, which is the tourist zone, as everyone know, you may not know, is Copacabana. Copacabana is cool, but once you if you go back and forth there, if you visit it more than once, you'll notice that that area is just basically for sex tourism. So if you know anybody that just keeps going to that same area, that's the reason why. But if you like myself and want to venture out and you go outside of that tourist area, which is known for sex tourism, and I like to stay in a place called Baja da Tijuca, you'll notice that there is racism, and you're not gonna miss it. But it's very subtle, and it's very how can I say, you might not notice it because your ass can't speak Portuguese, or you might not notice it because you're just so happy to be in another country besides your own. You overlook the little small stuff, and little small stuff, it took me some time also to notice it. But I had friends that pointed out things that opened up my eyes, and I did see it. And what you'll notice is that Baja da Tijuca is an area for rich white Brazilians. So you being black is kind of not normal. So if you go to grocery stores in Baja, if you go to very, very expensive restaurants in Baja, you might notice looks or the service might be a little different because, number one, they think you're Brazilian. So that's a good thing about Brazil. No matter what you are, you're coming from another Latin country, you're African, or you're black from the US, or you're from Canada, the UK. No matter where you're from in the world, you go to Brazil, you fit in until you open your mouth. Because the language is what's going to give you away, not your look or not your color. Because there's Asians in Brazil, there's black people in Brazil, there's people in Brazil that looks however you may look like in whatever country you're from. That's what I'm trying to say. So by you being black, you're going to be stereotyped, most definitely, if you go outside of Copacabana. And most people don't realize that because they stay their ass in Copacabana just for that one reason, which I just mentioned before. Starts with an S and ends in tourism. So you might be thinking, well, why go back? Well, if it bothers you that much, which it doesn't really bother me because it's little minor stuff, then I would suggest then don't go. It doesn't matter what country it is. But it's minor to me because once I do notice it, or if I do notice it, I just start talking English. And that's when, especially if you visited more than one time in Brazil, you'll notice that black Brazilians and black people outside of Brazil are two different shits. Once you start talking English, then you're not black no more. You're American, and they treat you different. But if you don't say anything, you'll be treated like a black Brazilian. So you could take that however you want to take it, but it's factual. If you don't say anything, if you're a black person, you go to Brazil, you're gonna be treated like a Brazilian. But I'm curious to know, which country between the two do you like more and why?